I mean, I think everyone is shocked and terrified, as we should be, but there are a lot of eerie parallels to the post 9/11 period, including, the mass disappearances of Muslims in Brooklyn, Queens, and New Jersey into immigration detention, and the creation of a prison in Guantanamo that the administration intentionally tried to locate outside the jurisdiction of U.S. courts. That was the avowed purpose. The government, when they have custody over someone, can do a lot to manipulate jurisdictional rules and evade the power of the courts. And here, too, once they've apprehended all of these students, there are a number of them, the pattern is to shift them around, evade the jurisdiction of, let's call them the home courts in the Northeast, and spirit them away in the middle of the night to Louisiana, which, the detention facility that Mahmoud is in is 5 hours from New Orleans drive. So it's its own little Guantanamo gulag. As outrageous as these actions are, I'm sort of reminded that, and again, this is the courts are critical, but these things take a long time, and I think sometimes the courts are like overly solicitous to these kind of arguments, as if they're, not in bad faith, not sort of transparently wrong. I think we've been frustrated a little bit by our federal judge in New Jersey. He's incredibly smart, but he's really taking a long time to get these jurisdictional questions right, I suppose. But meanwhile, he has the power, and even had the power pursuant to an emergency request we made on Sunday when his wife went into labor, to grant bail. I mean, what is the mystery behind that? Sort of have him check in with ICE, put him on an ankle bracelet. It's such a routine process, but the government wields so much power when they, have the body. And as I tried to tell the judge, the government's claiming that they have the body, but you have the power over the body. You should bring him here now. That's your job. Like, this is habeas of all things. I think, to me, the kind of terrifying part of this is just, it's one thing to revoke someone's student visa and, give them 30 to 60 days to find their way home. It's quite another where that revocation is paired with the very goal of this in terrorem action of putting someone in jail. Mahmoud Khalil is, I'm not trying to be like humble, but he's a very good legal team, and he's been in jail for 7 weeks. And so, everyone is understandably terrified, not just that they might lose their academic opportunity, but that they could spend 6 months in a detention facility in Louisiana. And that happened with another Columbia student who around the same weekend was visited by ICE in her dorm room, and she made the decision to escape. She was told her visa was revoked. Columbia University sent her an email demanding she evacuate her dorm room by 7 p.m. So she went to her aunt's house in upstate New York, went to Canada, and escaped the United States, home to India, rather than try and fight from inside a Louisiana detention center. That's America these days, yeah.
But Baher, I think just picking up on Tom's question, related to your Guantanamo work before, because I actually think you have like a lot of perspective on where all of these things may be going. Just in the Khalil case, we have, I think, a bunch of different threads that many of us that are working in the human rights space coming together, right? So we have an attack on institutions that can have kind of like a resistant perspective, foundations, civil society organizations, universities, the media. Then we have an attack on a particular group of people, immigrants, which has been another kind of like thread that has been pretty consistent with the current administration. And then we have an attack on certain rights here, like speech, expression. And then, of course, we have the particular focus on political advocacy around Israel and Palestine. So I want to just like set that up as, these different threads that are captured in the Khalil case, but really to ask you a bigger question, which is, and maybe this is a question about priorities that CCR is setting, but I think it's specifically a question about how do you think this is going to play out? So with all of these various kind of things that are a focus for different forms of repression. Can you just like take us through like when you're awake at 3 a.m. at night and you imagine what the next month or 2 or 3 are going to look like? Like, what are the things that you worry about and think are going to become more and more concerning?
Yeah, I mean, I think you ticked off a number of features that are, it's an obviously frequently used word, but are features of an authoritarian regime that wants to govern through some one-party rule and like largely without dissent, and where dissent will become not, normal part of the discourse, but criminalized. One piece that might have been missing from your catalog is the invocation of like wartime narratives and wartime authority. So the invocation of the Alien Enemies Act, the soon-to-be invocation of the Insurrection Act, the closing of the southern border by relying on Article 4 of the Constitution that requires the government to repel an invasion. And so one place where I see this, is very similar is that this administration is, projecting a global war on terrorism, but at the southern border, not, externally, and invoking those military powers. I don't mean to be alarmist, but I think the sort of identifying who enemies are of the state, dissidents, immigrants, invoking military authority. I think the goal is not to limit it to the border or to seacoast. I think ultimately the goal is to normalize the possibility of military presence on the interior. And so either in the midterm elections or the next presidential elections, the administration would seek to normalize and legitimize the use of the military domestically to carry out the first 4 authoritarian actions you want: repression of dissent, elimination of attacking immigrants, and ultimately one-party rule. I have to hope we won't get there, but it does really require sort of like an obvious recognition of what's at stake and a will to fight it collectively. Because no one can do this. No one institution can do this on their own. Civil society needs big law, which needs the courts, which needs universities, in order to preserve like just the most basic democratic processes.